Parashat Beshalach, and he sent. So here is our brief overview of the Torah portion that includes chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, and a little bit of 17. So it's a little lengthy. No. Yeah, I think that's right. Chapter 13 is where this is just after the events of Passover, and they're actually leaving Egypt. And it says that God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, but rather the way of the wilderness, because they might, see battle and be afraid. Yes, sir.
Is that the terrible wilderness?
That great and terrible wilderness, yes, absolutely. And then they have columns of cloud and fire leading them out of Egypt. And then in chapter 14, Pharaoh is lured to his destruction. He is, I think they call that rope-a-dope. Where they lured him right out of Egypt and into battle where he is ultimately destroyed. And they do have the Red Sea crossing, or the Sea of Reeds, Yom Suf. And that all happens in Exodus 14. And then in Exodus 15, we have the Song of the Sea. This is not the Song of Moses. The Song of Moses is in Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy 32 or 34, I don't remember. But this is the Song of the Sea, where they sing and celebrate after the Egyptians are drowned in the Red Sea. And immediately after that, there are complaints about the bitter waters at Merah in chapter 15. And then in chapter 16, approximately 30 days into their journey, there's some grumbling about food. And this is where we get the portion where the Sabbath day is initiated, really. It's proclaimed openly, not that people before this didn't observe the Sabbath day, which I certainly think that they did, but it is, what was that word we used last time? Anybody remember? Codified. Yes. It is codified to where it's actually written down and regulations are given regarding it, and we have manna coming down from heaven and quail coming into the camp. And then in Exodus 17, we have some more grumbling about water. We've got Moses striking the rock at Horeb with his staff, the people getting a drink. They doubt God's presence, and the Amalekites show up to attack. And there is a battle, an all-day battle with the Amalekites. That is the overview of our portion Beshalach. So I want to, I've selected some key elements of this rather lengthy section to discuss with you. And the first thing that I want to talk about briefly is the constant presence of God. And I want to read this little section to you from Exodus 13, verse 21. It says that Yehovah went ahead of them in a column of cloud during the daytime to lead them on their way, and at night a column of fire to give them light. Thus they could travel both by day and by night. Neither the column of cloud by day nor the column of fire at night went away from in front of the people. This really is a continuous and constant visual reminder of His presence. God's presence is with them every step of the way, by day and by night, to lead them, to give them light. I mean, we have this we have this idea in our minds regarding some kind of a pillar, that goes from the ground up to the sky. And that's, the Hebrew word, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's, it's generally referencing to a standing stone or a pillar that's sitting on the ground. But really what it means is something that is going up. And we all have this idea of something that's this pillar of cloud that goes up into the sky and a pillar of fire that goes up into the sky. It just occurred to me that while that certainly could be accurate, it also could be that the column of cloud that is covering the Hebrews is actually a large bank of clouds that is only covering the Hebrews. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't extend across the sky like you would think. You know, when you see a cloudy day, it's going from horizon to horizon, or at least most of it. But what if this column of clouds was actually over the Israelite camp and only over the Israelite camp? Like a canopy. It just occurred to me that that's a possibility with the Hebrew language, that perhaps it was shading them from the sun, you know, and providing a canopy over them. And it's going up from the sky like a mushroom kind of cloud that's covering over. I don't want to say a mushroom cloud, but yeah, I mean, it could be just a big cloud bank that is a column in regards to, you know, that's the defining characteristic of a column, is that it is, you know, it's localized to one area. It's not a huge slab. It's a localized area. And the clouds could be just over the Israelites. Now, what does that do for the fire? I have no idea. Think about this. It doesn't say that it keeps them warm. It doesn't say that it gives them warm. It says that it gives them light. Now, what if this same cloud of a bank of clouds is covering over this camp, and lightning is flashing continuously over and through these clouds? That's going to light up the scene quite a bit.
Well, this is a very large group of people.
It is.
So there's not just like whatever the pillar of fire was, it would need to be substantive enough that it's lighting a pretty good area.
Sure.
So it might not be what we might think.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're talking about, I mean, rough estimate, if you want to be conservative, you're talking about 2 million people. Now, I don't know, you know, I have seen some really historic like concerts that were held in Russia that literally had 1.5 million people. It's a fairly big area, but it's nothing for a group of clouds to cover that area. But if you, and it's often you can see, you know, when you see, for example, fire coming down from heaven, it's very potentially likely that is not a fireball that's coming out of the sky. It's potentially lightning. That's a lot of what fire can reference in the Torah. And I think it's just an idea that I wanted to share with you, that in your mind that gives you maybe a better picture of what's happening. Because like Nathan said, if you've got just a little column of fire, yeah, that can put out a lot of light, potentially, certainly. But what about, I mean, lightning bolts flashing almost continuously from these clouds that extend for obviously several miles, because this is a fairly large camp. That would light up things real nice. But that's totally me just, you know, hypothesizing. Gracie?
I had in my head that I read here, and I thought I read it twice, but I can't find it now, that when Pharaoh and his army were coming, God put a cloud between Israel and the army,
Yes.
so the army couldn't even see them.
Right. And that's
pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's something that to me is a kink in my idea, because that's a little weird. And I have a note regarding that I'm going to share with you in just a moment, because that is certainly some kind of weird spiritual phenomenon, because
He'll stand between us, if it's through his spirit or power.
Yeah.
Between us and danger he doesn't want to.
Right. Yeah, and that's that. You know, the fact that and I have in my mind, just like you probably do, of some kind of a column that's maybe wide. It could be 100 yards wide. You know, that's big, and there's light pouring out of it on one side, and impenetrable blackness on the other, to where the Egyptians cannot see the Hebrews, but the Hebrews can see everything. That is one of those things that you get from God, like hail mixed with fire, where two elements in nature are mixing and they're not supposed to. That's certainly a weird element. Jerry?
If you put the cloud behind the pillar of fire, that made it dark for the Egyptians, but it made it light for the Israelites. So that, because this all happened during the night.
Mm-hmm.
They crossed the dry land during the night.
Yeah.
But they could see Pharaoh and his armies before this happened. I mean, they were close enough so they could actually see them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they see them coming, they freak out for sure. So, yeah, there's every reason to believe they could see through it.
A little bit of confusion there.
So, what I wanted to think about is not just the practical implications of what does this look like and how does it work, because that's fairly pedestrian and surface level. What I really wanted to look at is two ideas. Do you think that these pillars are representative of something? Could be some other thing or some spiritual significance attached to them. I mean, what would you say about that? I'm asking you to theorize, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, these are personified as the presence of God, right?
Absolutely.
They say it is Yahweh,
Yeah.
or that He shrouded Himself in it.
Sure.
So it's probably something to say about Him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. He does say that He encompasses light and darkness. He does say in one of the prophets, I don't remember which, it was Isaiah or Ezekiel, that He brings life and He brings death. He brings good and He does bring evil. So there is this, and you can see that clearly, like we said a minute ago. It's like these things that don't seem to go together. That's a clear indication of God's physical presence for sure. So these pillars representing the spiritual nature of God, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think of, like, for the cloud, when Jehovah inhabited the holiest place, at the mercy seat,
Mm-hmm.
no one could see in there. The priests couldn't see,
Right.
and so it was a thick cloud, not necessarily dark, but so thick like cotton you couldn't see through it.
Yeah.
And so I think of the glory of God.
There you go.
leading
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. Absolutely. Gracie?
Well, anybody that's been around the ocean much, especially by near the land, not necessarily out in the middle of the ocean, has had to have seen some really, really foggy, cloudy days.
Yeah.
I mean, you can hardly see to drive.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's in the daytime. At night, it's even worse.
Right.
Because it's dark.
Right. Right.
So
And
that's what I
probably
picture.
can be the continuing provision of God too,
Mm.
blocking the heat.
Yeah.
In the desert.
Blocking the heat, because we live in the desert and it can get really hot during the day, and cloud, I will tell you, is very welcome when you're in the shade. There's a fairly significant difference between being in the direct sunlight and being in the shade. I mean, when you look at your app on your phone and it says it's going to be 110, that's in the shade, not in direct sunlight. When you step into direct sunlight, you can add 10, 15 degrees to that.
I just, me and how I go with my son to the Mennonite church on
Sure.
Sunday, and how it's all about Jesus and the steps. But I hear the word
I
step,
ain't going.
and of course this is a lot of teaching that comes out of the step, right? Each step that we take, following His steps.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just so significant in terms of our positioning every day, every minute,
Yeah,
right, with
Yeah.
the Lord.
sure. Good insight. Will somebody else have a hand up? Jimmy?
It makes me think of the duality of the two trees that were in the garden.
Yeah.
Quite different.
Yes.
And I see these pillars as kind of being tree-like,
Yes.
going up and then branching out. And
Yeah.
spreading out.
That's a great insight. I like that.
But I think it's really showing that if you want to be part of the kingdom, it's right there.
Yeah.
You got to follow it, and it moves around, and it's not in. It wasn't at that point in one place, but it was headed
Yeah.
circuitously
And
toward a place.
And you can see that as you
That
continue to
destination.
read, is that cloud, when that cloud gets up and moves or whatever it does, they're following it. It
Otherwise,
is.
you're out of the kingdom.
That's
You're-
right. Yeah.
You're a straggler,
Sure.
and you got to stick with God and let Him lead and follow.
Yeah.
And you're going to be in that favor.
Right. Absolutely. Angela, will you come closer and grab the microphone and begin to man it for me?
You got to man it.
You got to man it.
You got to man in a manly fashion.
Okay. Speak your piece.
What he was just saying about the cloud, I remember listening to, I don't even remember who it was, talking about how it was that you could, in the wilderness, you would pitch your tent, and you would, some of those locations they were at for years and years and years. I mean, you could think about, oh, maybe we should plant a garden, maybe we should build a porch, but every morning you had to wake up and look out of your tent. Had the cloud moved? Because if it did move, it was time for you to pack up and go. And so you couldn't get stuck.
You don't put your roots down deep.
And we heard this message one year when we were sleeping out in the backyard in our tent. And it stuck with me because it was like, every morning you got to wake up and see, do I still live here?
Yeah.
Or is it time to move?
Yeah.
And these two right here really have that spirit. Of, if it's time to move,
that traveling
we're gonna
spirit.
go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great insight. Great insight. Yeah, Daryl, come, Angela.
The one thing that strikes me as being really weird. Now, I assume this cloud and this fire is 40 years.
Yeah.
It isn't 2 weeks.
No, it's 40 years.
What army who might be thinking of attacking these Israelites by the millions, they send out their scouts, and I know what that's all about because I was a scout in the army during Vietnam. So these scouts go out to check this out, and they observe this pillar of fire and this cloud, and it isn't just a bolt of lightning; it's there. Now, what would motivate you to say, okay, this isn't even close to normal?
Yeah.
We're going to attack these people.
Yeah, we're not getting anywhere near these people. I mean, you could imagine, looking out on the horizon and seeing a pillar of light coming down from the sky. You might definitely get curious to get it close enough to see something's going on out there, but then you start hearing stories from the people around you about what happened in Egypt. And you're either really curious and you want to get closer because you want to know what's going on with this strange God who's doing these things, or if you have an evil heart, you might think, I'm getting away from these people. Yeah. This is potentially dangerous.
I would think that would be the best deterrent you would have without saying anything.
Yeah.
Just let them observe what they're about to take on.
It didn't seem to stop the Amalekites, and it didn't seem to stop the Egyptians. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. This is good insight. Angela, you give that to Jerry for just a sec. Whoa, you hold your horses, Jerry.
Oh. You just mentioned what I was going to talk about.
Oh, good. Well, we're coming to that in just a sec. Just give that to Angie. We'll come back to you in a sec. All right. So the pillars, fascinating wisdom and insight into a lot of this thing. But I want to drive something home to you right now to think about. Okay. Do you have pillars in your life? What is it? Because I think that we need to have this in our minds, that there is a constant presence of God with you. And I'm not talking about feeling the heebie-jeebies every once in a while and just feeling God's presence. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, do you have, and I don't mean physical, present, something you can look at and see, but what are these present reminders of God for you? What are they? Jerry?
I think that if you receive the Holy Spirit like God says that you do under the renewed covenant, that if you have read the Torah so that you know what it says, God will use His Holy Spirit and He will constantly remind you if you do something wrong. Hey, does this line up with my word, my Torah, my ordinances, or whatever, my law?
Yep.
So I think the Holy Spirit probably would be that light that
absolutely
is supposed to be shining in each and every one of us.
And there's plenty of language to that effect in the New Testament regarding the light of revelation of God. And we know that revelation is often transmitted to us through the Holy Spirit. And it can get even more mundane than that. Angela?
Doesn't it say in Revelation for one of those churches that overcomes that they will become pillars in His temple?
Yes,
and
it does.
Is that the same? Is that idea linked to this pillar?
It certainly could be. That's something to look at. Yeah, that's a good idea to maybe look at the Greek language that is used in relation to that church, and then translate that back into Hebrew through the Septuagint. And I bet you would find a link there, because I think that's an interesting insight. But I think we also need to remember, and this is something that I hadn't done but I was inspired to do so probably about a month ago by Rabbi Daniel Lappin, and that is to wake up every morning in my journal and write down 5 things that I am grateful for. Because that continuously reminds me of the blessings of God in my life, the constant presence of God. The fact that I am alive, that I am breathing, that I have the health that I have, such as it is. It may not be perfect, for each of us is dealing with our own little things, but the food that we have, the homes that we have, the fellowship that we have, these are all tremendous blessings from God, and we so easily become complacent, and we are a people who are constantly looking for something else other than what we have.
We're looking for what we get focused on what is wrong, and we have to force ourselves. And I think it's a total attitude changer.
Yeah.
I was trying it tonight, just looking around at the sky, and thank you that I have eyes, thank you that I have hair. Just the silliest things you think, but if you focus on being thankful for what's right, then you get your mind off of what is wrong.
And and I think that we need to be a people who overcomes that negativity bias. That that social scientists demonstrate pretty clearly that something that's negative in your life outweighs the positive in your mind, not necessarily in reality, but negativity bias is a huge thing.
I just believe that we are called to allow the pillar of the Lord to dwell within us and to be our constant. And so in counseling, I ask people, how are we going to build this pillar inside of you? And they begin to see what that structure looks like, and it solidifies their identity. The pillar becomes the identity because it is the pillar of the Lord.
That's good insight, and that means, I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's really about building pillars of truth in your life that are foundationally based upon the words of God, because the words of truth are so very, very important. Because if you are not founded and rooted in the truth, the lies of the adversary or the lies that you tell yourself in your own mind, they can get you. They can get you. And those pillars of truth, I like that idea.
Seeing this creates the authenticity of Jesus in your life.
Yeah, I feel you. So these pillars, let us remember that we have constant presence in our lives. We have our own pillars of fire and pillars of cloud. It's not a visible representation. Remember also that these people are spiritual children. Yeah. They are very young infants in the Lord, if you want to call it that. And oftentimes the Lord is gracious and will give more powerful signs of His presence. I know that when most of us who have some kind of testimony of whether we were raised in a churched home, and then we went off and went astray and did what we wanted to for a while, and then we experienced the salvation of the Lord all over again, or whether we were not raised in a Christian home and we came to know the Lord later in life, you know that there's that period right at the beginning when things are happening and you can really feel it in your heart. You can sense and feel the presence of God. And I know how frustrating it is to become a little bit of a more mature Christian, and that presence seems to wane. And we get frustrated and we say, where's the presence of the Lord? It's the same way. It's designed that way. You need to learn to walk by faith and not by sight. And certainly not by feelings. Because if you are relying upon your feelings, they're ephemeral and they're easily changeable. And they're not often they are not guided by the Spirit of God. They are guided by your own thinking, your own experience. So I think it's critical to recognize that God will draw close to a person and they'll feel His presence in a real big way. But then He needs to back off. Why? Because He wants you to chase Him. He wants you to follow Him. He wants you to follow Him, and He's not going to stand still and just let you, get close. There are times, and those times of trouble when He gets close, and a lot of times in hindsight, but But a lot of times there's those dry periods, we call them the spiritual valleys, where He feels far away. because he wants you to seek him. And we are supposed to be a people, because we have the Spirit of God, we have the indwelling presence of God, we have more of a revelation of what's going on. We're not supposed to be spiritual babies. We're not supposed to be relying upon these visual, physical manifestations of God. We're supposed to rely more on his word and his truth and being obedient and living out each day according to the principles that he's laid down for us. And that's how we get closer to God, by obedience, frankly. So we keep our minds on those pillars in our lives. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the destruction of the enemy. This is from Exodus chapter 14, verse 1. And I want to read this for you because this is, note that this whole Torah portion is bookended by two battles. And you know that when you see something on either end, you're dealing with a menorah pattern. You're dealing with some kind of a chiastic structure. Now, I have not delved deep into the chiastic structure of this Torah portion, but I will say at the very beginning we have a battle with Pharaoh, and at the very end we have a battle with the Amalekites. It's not for no reason that this whole Torah portion is bookended by these two battles, and they're very different, and they represent some interesting things. So let's talk briefly about the battle with Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And I want to read this section to you. In Exodus 14, starting right at the beginning, Yehovah said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel to turn around and set up camp in front of Pi Hachorot, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon, a camp opposite by the sea. Then Pharaoh will say that the people of Israel are wandering aimlessly in the countryside. The desert has closed in on them. I will make Pharaoh so hard-hearted that he will pursue them. Thus I will win glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will realize at last that I am Yehovah." The people did as ordered. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people. They said, "What have we done, letting Israel stop being our slaves?" So he prepared his chariots and took his people with him. He took 600 first-quality chariots, as well as all of the other chariots in Egypt, along with their commanders. And Yehovah made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he pursued the people of Israel as they left boldly, it says, with a high hand. And the Egyptians went on after them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, with his cavalry and his army, and he overtook them as they were encamped by the sea, by Pi Hachorot, in front of Baal Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and saw the Egyptians right there, coming after them. In great fear, the people of Israel cried out to Yehovah. And then they said to Moshe, "Was it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out to die in the desert? Why have you done this to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we tell you in Egypt to leave us alone and we'll just go on being slaves for the Egyptians? It would be better for us to be the Egyptians' slaves than to die in the desert." And Moshe answered the people, "Stop being so fearful. Stand firm, and you will see how Yehovah is going to save you. He will do it today. Today you have seen the Egyptians, but you will never see them again. Yehovah will do battle for you. Just calm yourselves." Yehovah asked Moshe, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift your staff, reach out with your hand over the sea and divide it in two. The people of Israel will advance into the sea on dry ground. As for me, I will make the Egyptians hard-hearted, and they will march in after them. Thus I will win glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all his army, chariots, and cavalry. Then the Egyptians will realize that I am Yehovah when I have won myself glory at the expense of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his cavalry." Then the angel of God, who was going ahead of the camp of Israel, moved away and went behind them. And the column of cloud moved away in front of them and stood behind them. It stationed itself between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was cloud and darkness here, but light by night there, so that one did not come near the other all night long. Moshe reached his hand out over the sea, and Yehovah caused the sea to go back before a strong east wind all night. He made the sea become dry land, and its water was divided in two. Then the people of Israel went into the sea on dry ground, with the water walled up for them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians continued their pursuit, going after them into the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and cavalry. Just before dawn, Yehovah looked out on the Egyptian army through the column of fire and cloud and threw them into a panic. He caused the wheels of their chariots to break off so that they could only move with difficulty. The Egyptians said, Yehovah is fighting for Israel against the Egyptians. Let's get away from them. And Yehovah said to Moshe, reach out your hand over the sea, and the water will return and cover the Egyptians with their chariots and cavalry. Moshe reached his hand out over the sea, and by dawn the sea had returned to its former depth. The Egyptians tried to flee, but Yehovah swept them into the sea. The water came back and covered all the chariots and cavalry of Pharaoh's army who had followed them into the sea. Not even one of them was left. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground in the sea, with the water walled up for them on their right and on their left. On that day, Yehovah saved Israel from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore. When Israel saw the mighty deed that Yehovah had performed against the Egyptians, the people feared Yehovah, and they believed in Yehovah and in his servant Moshe. That's a powerful section of Scripture, and there is so much instructive material. We could talk about this for a week. But I want to point out a couple of things. Pharaoh and Egypt together were absolutely lured to destruction. And we've talked about this before in regards to the hard heart of Pharaoh, God hardening his heart. And I think that Calvinists have had a field day with this thing, saying that, Pharaoh didn't have free will, he didn't want it, he wouldn't have done that, but God forced him to do it. And I think that might be the wrong way to look at it. What you might need to look at is like this. Pharaoh had it in his heart to enslave these people and do evil. But I think what we need to recognize is that his will to do so petered out after a while. After experiencing the blows of God, he's saying, man, my heart is just not in it. And God said, allow me to help you. I will give you strength to keep fighting, because that's really what you want to do. It's in your heart to fight against me. It's in your heart to fight against my people. But you've lost your will. You've been beaten down. I will give you strength to continue the fight. As bad as that might be, I think that's what God has done to him, has given him the heart to continue fighting when a normal person, and he's also inspired by the adversary. He's inspired by the devil. He's got demonic influence in his life that is driving him. This is a perfect picture of the anti-Messiah, of many anti-Messiahs throughout history who have sought to destroy the people of God. That they have it in their heart, a hatred for God, demonic influence, and a will to do it. But they get the tar beat out of them, and God strengthens their heart.
Sounds like Congress.
It does, kind of.
We really see the mercy of God here. Not many places in Scriptures talk about God considering other people groups necessarily, but here it says specifically, so they will know that I am the Lord.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. That's an excellent insight. That and that's something that I want you to think about. People talk about God bringing glory to himself, and I think what's interesting, and I think it was either Angie's father or perhaps Daryl Dyke, one of my teachers from long ago, who said, when God wants to get glory for himself, he doesn't really have to do anything except show up. It's not like he's got this plan to bring glory to himself. He just acts. He just reveals himself in the course of history and does what comes naturally to him, and it brings tremendous glory to him because that's who he is. He's just bringing great honor and glory to himself just by showing up and doing what comes naturally to him. Saving people, rescuing them, helping the downtrodden.
It's been about a year, but do you remember the slides that showed Nueva on one side of the Gulf of Aqaba?
I do.
And then going across to Saudi Arabia. That's where Baal Zephon is.
Yeah.
Is that slow walk-up place. But there was a huge one spot on the Sinai side of the Gulf of the Red Sea, which was a staging area where you could put a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
It's a small little town. They have a water desalination plant there, and you know it's a large flat place. And there's this one little entrance point, which is a wadi, which is almost always dry, and that was the only way that they could have come there from Egypt. And then that's a perfect place for the fire to be. And there's that saddle.
You're talking about between the walls of the canyon.
Yeah.
And I think when we talked earlier about the way of the wilderness versus the way of the Philistines, it was brought to my attention this week that those were, you ever heard of the Via Maris, the way of the sea that is running through Israel? There's a huge trade route that went through there. I think that the way of the Philistines is literally the name of a well-traveled area where to get between the area of the Philistines and the Egyptians. And that there's another place called the Way of the Wilderness. It's a road. It's going through a broad wadi with canyon walls on either side, like Jimmy has discussed. And I think that the Way of the Wilderness is actually a route that takes you from Egypt over into Saudi Arabia to the kingdom of Midian. If you were using a ferry boat or something, maybe to cross over for the beach the beach at Nueva, you'd probably get a ferry boat if you want to cross back and forth between the land of Midian and the Egyptian peninsula.
On both sides, it goes a mile down.
Yeah.
But there's a little saddle under the water, which is smooth.
Now, you guys, what Jimmy's talking about, you've seen, I presume, the documentary with Jim and Penny Caldwell, or there's several of them. Yeah. Tim Mahoney.
Ever seen that on the map before?
Yeah, you can look at it on Google's 3D imagery. It's quite fascinating. So, yeah, if you haven't looked at that, I'd strongly recommend it. It's one of the neatest things ever that I have seen in a long time. But I want to point out a couple of things regarding this section. You know what strikes me is that God said to him in verse 15, "Why are you crying out to me?" It's like, well, what did you expect me to do? The Egyptians are coming at us with their whole army's coming. We're a bunch of slaves standing here with no weapons. What do you mean, why am I crying out to you? It strikes me that God had an expectation that Moses knew what to do. And if he didn't, he should have. It's just an idea that I had, but it's almost like this, and we have talked about this in regarding prayer and expecting what God can do. And I think that it's possible to just think about it in this way. They're very much in a predicament. They're standing here, a huge group of people, and there's an army coming towards them, and the people are absolutely freaking out, and Moses tells them he has enough presence of mind and enough faith in God to say, stop talking. Don't freak out. Just stand where you are, and you're going to see what God will do. And then God says, why are you crying out to me? It's almost like God is expecting Moses, and he's telling Moses, I want you, because they're seeing in their mind and in their vision, we've got two options here. We're going to get slaughtered by the people coming from this direction, or we're going to go into the ocean and die, and we're going to drown. Those are the only two options we can even fathom. But I think God is telling Moses, I want you to use your imagination, and I want you to think of a third alternative. I just want you to use your imagination. And I think that we need to do this in our own lives because we have trouble, we have difficulty, and we see trouble going this way and trouble going that way. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I don't know what to do. And God is saying to you, I want you to think of a third option. Just use your imagination. Imagine what I could do. And then I want you to step out in faith as though I've already done it. So it's almost like he's saying to Moses, just imagine. How could you get out of this? Could you imagine? Use your imagination and just say, what could you possibly do? And I think that it was almost like he was expecting Moses, well, I suppose if I hold my rod up over this water, it's just going to part and we can walk through and we'll escape and it'll come back. Now, I don't know that his imagination could have even fathomed that. But it's almost like God was expecting him to use his imagination and say, you don't need to cry out to me. You just need to imagine what I can do because I'm here to save you. You know I've told you this is the sign for you that you're going to take these people to that mountain. That mountain is across that water. You're standing at this water. You are exactly where I told you to go. My cloud has led you right here. The place that you need to get to is 8 miles across that water. Use your imagination. Where do you think I'm going to have you go? Well, I imagine we could walk on water. I imagine you could part this water and we could walk through it. It's almost like God wants him to use his imagination. It just occurs to me that he's asking Moses, exercise your faith, buddy. Exercise your faith. You'll see what I can do. Gracie, would you capture Gracie, Angela?
The Lord Jesus said you have not because you ask not.
Yeah.
Could that be similar to this?
I agree 100% that that's very similar. Yes. That it would be like Jesus saying, you don't have because you don't ask. If you had faith like a mustard seed, you could do thus and such. And I think this is kind of what's happening here in this section, that God is saying to Moses, just do something. Act in faith.
So, Alan, you ministered this to me this week when we were talking about reaching out to people and explaining to people what they can be delivered from with the word of the Lord. And you said, let's not say you could be delivered from this or this. Let's let them imagine what it would feel like to live like this. What does it feel like to live without anxiety? What does it feel like to live without depression?
Sure.
Give us that. That's exactly what you're talking
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You need to exercise imagination because that's what prayer is in the Hebrew way of thinking. It's imagineering, if you want to call it that. I think it's a good way to look at it. So he's saying, why are you crying out to me?
He's rebuking them for praying.
It's almost like you don't need to cry out to me. You just need to believe. Yeah. In a lot of cases, I would tend to agree with you that we need to act in faith instead of sitting on the ground and crying out and going, God, what do I do? What do I do? And he's like, move.
At God's expectations, where Jesus rebukes Peter for not having the faith to walk on water.
Yeah.
That's a high expectation, I would say.
It is.
It's not considered a high expectation.
No, you're absolutely right. Angela, microphone, please.
Maybe sometimes God gets frustrated with us because we don't understand just how awesome he is and what he is capable of.
That's a good insight. Absolutely.
He's saying, think bigger, man. Think bigger.
When he wants to. It's got to be an auspicious
His will.
moment.
Yeah.
It's got to be when it's his will.
Yeah.
And when it's his will, anything can happen.
Yeah.
And when it's not his will, you just kind of get drowned. You're going to be a jerk.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something. Oh, please. Yeah, absolutely.
Just one other thought. It kind of reminds me of another situation when the disciples were in the boat with Jesus. He falls asleep. The storm comes up. And these guys are freaking out. Like, we're going to die here.
Yeah.
They wake up Yeshua, and he says, what's up, you men of little faith? It's like, why are you freaking out?
Yeah.
And they're going, what?
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of similar?
I think it absolutely is similar, that he wakes up and is saying, why are you crying out to me?
Yeah.
He rebukes them for not taking control of the situation themselves, which is a little weird. It's a little weird. It feels odd to us. Daryl, you can reach out between you there. It feels weird to have that type of expectation placed upon you, but how real is that? That's pretty serious business.
It had already been demonstrated to the children of Israel that God acted outside of the realm of time and space.
Yes.
And that's the faith point that we must have.
Yep. Yep.
to know that He will act out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
on our
absolutely,
behalf.
absolutely. And I think you'll recall in your own lives. I know that each of you would raise your hand and say, God has worked in my life. I have seen God working in ways that I didn't even know were possible, and I had this problem, and I was praying about it, and people were praying for me, and it just kind of, I went through that valley, and I look back and I go, man, God really saw me through that. We got to remember those things. We have to remember those things of how God acts for us, and man, we can. It'd probably amaze us if we just decided to act, if we decided to just have faith and move forward.
Have analysis paralysis.
Yes.
Just waiting on Him, right?
Yes.
Instead
Yes.
just
Yep.
do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just say one other thing?
Please.
When I think about this, it almost is like God is saying, look, did I not say you will do greater things than I?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if what He's trying to say to you is, I have amazing power that I am giving you as believers.
Yeah. Because you'll
I do
do.
miracle stuff, and I'm telling you, you can do greater things than I.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't believe that,
Yeah.
then He would, He would
Yeah.
have every reason to say, what's up?
Yeah.
Did you not hear what I said?
Yeah.
And we don't get that.
We
I
don't.
mean, if you ponder that thought and
Nope.
understand what He just imparted to you in these two stories,
Mm-hmm.
it's life-changing.
Yeah. It's seriously life-changing. If we could just get it through our thick skulls and recognize it for what it is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So, what's interesting, he has repeated twice, and you always pay close attention when you see something repeated twice, that the Egyptians will know. And over in chapter 15, in the next chapter, it says the leaders of Philistia. The whole world is made aware of what's happening here. In fact, there's a section of the next chapter where there's some very curious language in Exodus 15:8. And if you want, you can just look at that and underline that section or put a little highlight there, because it is actually suggested that when the Red Sea parted, would someone read for me Exodus 15:8? Whoever wants to, with their most stentorian voice, nice and loud. Go ahead, Daryl.
15:8.
Yes, please.
And with the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright like a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea.
Yes. Now, what's interesting about that passage is it seems to be talking about more than one body of water. And the Hebrew sages have suggested, because it says in that same section that the leaders, the kings of Philistia, were in awe about this thing. It is actually suggested that when the Red Sea parted, bodies of water and rivers and lakes and streams all over the world had some type of weird something happen to them. You know that what happened when Joshua was leading the children of Israel into the Promised Land, that the waters of the Jordan River stopped upstream by several miles and just began to pile up. Yeah. And so it's certainly possible, by looking at the way that is worded, that people all over the world saw something that day that puzzled them. That waters all over the planet experienced something weird happening, whether a river just stopped flowing and began to pile up, or a lake parted, I don't know. But the language that is used in that section seems to suggest that God's power was known all over the world at the same instant.
It's kind of like collateral damage.
Yeah.
There might be other examples of that in Scripture.
Sure.
One that comes to mind is when Jesus came out of the grave. It says many other people did.
That's
too.
right.
It kind of makes you wonder.
It's like the power of God was so strongly manifested that not only did Jesus come out of the grave, but 100 other people that maybe were in the vicinity. So it's...
The other example of the person who's thrown into a grave and someone else came to life.
Yes. I think that was Elijah or Elisha, the prophet, that happened with. Yeah, absolutely. So there's something going on with the power of God that it seems to spread. Angela, microphone for Jerry. The microphone is by the coffee pot. Thank you very much.
I've heard rumors that if Christ hadn't have said Lazarus come forth, we would have had a resurrection. Everybody's grave would
That's a good
true or not.
insight. Absolutely.
Words carefully.
Yeah, choose your words carefully. No, I think that's absolutely true. And you can see from this last little section, the last thing I want to point out to you here is that it says that the people feared Yehovah and they believed in Yehovah and in his servant Moshe. This is such a really nice picture for us of God, the relationship between God and his mediator. It's going to be for God and Yeshua. Because they see the miracles, the signs that he did, and they believe in God and they believe in the one he sent. That's a good picture of that. Now, I want to just briefly share with you an overview, a couple of key points that I want to do a comparison, contrast with Pharaoh in Egypt and the Amalekites later on in chapter 17. So I'm going to do Pharaoh in Egypt on this side of the chart, and then we'll do the other side in a moment. But just pay attention to a couple of these little things that you have seen in this story. Number one, Egypt/Pharaoh are completely defeated. Just completely defeated. We don't know if Pharaoh is dead. We don't know whether he was actually with the army or if he was up on a high hill telling them to go forth. But the kingdom of Egypt is decimated. If you'll remember, they had locusts that ate every green plant and tree and shrub. They had great hailstones which came and killed all their cattle are dead. Their economy, their productivity, all of their firstborn males, this place, their workforce, and they were a strong world power. Everything about Egypt is just gone. It's done. Pharaoh himself may have died. The whole army, certainly a good chunk of it, all the chariots, that would be like the United States losing all of its tanks, ships, nuclear weapons, everything just gone. You're no longer a world power.
And they're still behind the 8 ball today.
And God said Egypt will never again exercise the control that they had at this time, never again, and they never did. Do you know how many times Egypt and Israel interacted with each other over the next 1,000 years? Once. With Pharaoh Shishak. And that was just him passing through on his chariot to fight the Hittites. Pharaoh and Egypt and Israel never really interacted again after this. And to this day, they don't really. They're basically at peace. Pharaoh, the Israelis today have a decent relationship with the Egyptians. Although they did attack in 48 and 67. But they have a decent relationship with them. Decent. But Pharaoh and Egypt were completely defeated. Number two, they were defeated by God alone. The Hebrews did absolutely nothing except walk. He told them to eat this lamb, put that blood on your door, and walk. They didn't save themselves. God did it all. The next thing is that Pharaoh is the leader. They have a leader, a singular leader, whereas with the Amalekites, we'll see in a little bit, that's a little different. We have Moshe's staff is used twice in this encounter. Once when he is parting the sea, and once to close it back up again. Okay? The next thing is that the people cried out to Yehovah for deliverance. Okay? But then they began to complain to Moses. Now then, there is a pillar of fire and cloud or whatever it is between God and the people of Israel and Egypt. Now, all of these elements together are suggestive of something. And I want you to think about this. I know this is a little bit small in your text, but I want to read it to you. It's from Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14. It says, by his death he might render ineffective the one who had power over death, and thus set free those who had been in bondage all their lives because of their fear of death. Who is Paul talking about here? Who did Yeshua, by his death, render ineffective? Who had the power of death at this time? That's the devil. I will suggest to you that this whole episode with Pharaoh in Egypt is a shadow picture of God's dealings with the devil in relation to his people. Completely defeated, led by one leader, the adversary, defeated by God alone. Moses' staff used twice, Yeshua coming twice to deal with the adversary. The people crying out to Yehovah. That there's a distinction made between God's people and the people of the enemy, this pillar of cloud. You'll see that a little bit more clearly in a moment, but I want you to just keep that in mind for just a moment, because I think that that's partly what that represents. Now I'm going to move forward just a little bit to discuss something else, and this is the Song of the Sea. And I just want to point out two things regarding this. Number one, what this looks like in a Sefer Torah scroll, which is quite fascinating. Do you notice something there? This is the text of the story of the Israelites on the right-hand side, the right-hand column, walking through the sea and defeating Pharaoh. And then that section in the middle where the text has been arranged to look like courses of brick in a wall, that's the Song of the Sea. And then it goes back to the regular formatting of the text. That only happens in the whole Torah twice. Does anybody know where the other one is? No. It's the Song of Deborah. It's two songs in the Torah. The words have been arranged to look like courses of bricks. And if you look at the Song of the Sea and the Song of Deborah, look at those this weekend if you get an opportunity and compare them and read them together and see what's interesting about that. Because the Hebrew sages, the Sopharim, the guys who write the Torah, have been doing it like that for thousands of years. The copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls that they found that predate Yeshua by 175 years, they're written like that. And all of them ever since. It's fascinating. It's quite interesting. You don't see that happening in the Torah very often. Only twice. Now, what's interesting to me is in chapter 16, and right near the end, he says, "If you will hear me, indeed hear me, then I will not bring upon you the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians." That is such a powerful statement to me that says that, unfortunately, here's the thing. I got to be careful as I say this, but you and I both know that sin has physical effects. It really does. It's not just a spiritual malady. It manifests itself physically. Frankly, it's going to talk a lot about it in the book of Leviticus when we get there, when we start talking about Metzorah, leprosy, what you call in the Bible, which is a physical manifestation of an inward uncleanness. And this tells me, God telling them in no uncertain terms, if you will hear me, really hear me, and listen to me and follow me, I will not put on you the diseases that I plagued the Egyptians with. Now, what are we talking about here? Because the word diseases is not used in relation to any of the 10 plagues that troubled the Egyptians during this time period. So what is he talking about? It certainly lends to that idea that there was more than just these 10 plagues, that there was other things happening in Egypt where the hand of God was upon them in a negative way. Angela, come closer, please.
I had a little thing on the word for sweet.
Sweet?
That is related to when he said that. Do you want me to wait till the end?
Where he said this?
Mm-hmm.
The water, yes, where the water of Merah. No, do it now. Absolutely. Absolutely. Talk about it. Because I think this is absolutely fascinating, and it's really...
Give a clue as to what he means by diseases.
Please, share that.
Right before this happens, they're complaining about water, and they find water, and it's bitter.
Yeah.
The bitter water that they can't drink. And God says,
Grab that tree.
put a tree in it. And somehow this tree makes this bitter water sweet. And so I wanted to show you something in the Hebrew with the letters. Okay, there's the word for rottenness or stink. This is used a couple times in the beginning of Isaiah. And it's spelled mem kuf. Mem is your letter for water, but it's also the letter that's used for chaos. Remember when we were studying Jonah and we talked about water being death? Mm-hmm. Okay, death, chaos. It's also the letter that's used for question words, like mah means what or how, or all these question words. So it's almost like this mystery, chaos thing. And I like to think of, when I read Genesis in the beginning, I like to think of God as really loving organization. You know, he's dividing things and he's separating. He's creating order out of chaos. Okay, so think of your water or your mem as your chaos. And then over here, the second letter of this word that means rottenness or stink is the kuf. And this is the paleo right here, like the sun coming up over the horizon. And this letter has a connotation of a circle, revolution, or time, or to surround, or follow. So kind of take all those in your mind. I know there's not an English word that does that, but it's kind of time, around, surround.
Cycles of time.
Cycles, okay. And so when you put these together, I'm thinking, okay, so what is this telling me? You've got chaos and this time. And so I'm thinking it's like a time of chaos. It's like this time when things are disorderly, this epic or era, or what is the word for eon?
Epoch.
An epoch of chaos, which is rotten. And it does stink. We're in the middle, well, not in the middle of it. We're towards the end of that epoch.
Epoch.
Right. So, hold on a second. Let's throw a tav in the middle of it. Okay, this is the paleo for tav. It means sign or covenant. Okay, that's the olive on the tav. That's our cross, our tree. Okay, so when we throw a tree in the middle of this word, it turns from rottenness and stink into sweet. And in this, right before this, he says throw a tree in the water, and the water becomes sweet. That's it.
Well, very interesting. That is quite fascinating.
Did I clarify that matok means sweet? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the word for sweet. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So, you know, I don't know of any other inducement to obey, because I think that there's a psalm, a couple of psalms actually, or Proverbs, which talk about obedience being healing for the bones and soundness to the navel. You know, there are several Proverbs of Solomon which talk about obedience and faithful to God inducing healing. It's just interesting to me when you think about it from this perspective. Daryl?
That's why I think Yah says we are to start our day, every day, first thing, reciting the Shema.
Yeah.
Because what does the Shema do? Hear and obey.
Yep.
You hear and obey His word. You start your day with that, you're good to go.
Absolutely. I don't know how many of you do that, but I definitely do. And I took the Shema. Well, no, the Shema is part of the greater Amidah prayer. And I took the Amidah and I turned it into a Messianic version. And I read that to myself every morning and every evening. And if you haven't done that, I really encourage you to do it. And it's something that I was just thinking about today. I was telling Angela that I would like to start our fellowship with doing the Amidah. I think it would be, in lieu of just the standard prayers that I say all the time, and just do that for like a whole year. Just every time we start, read the Amidah. It takes about 7 minutes to read the whole thing. It's a lengthy little prayer, but there are different elements of it, and it is so encouraging and profound, and I would like very much to do that, and I will probably start doing that very soon. I think you'll really enjoy it. So, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, now as our connection to God seems a little maybe disconnected, and our view of His miraculous work is maybe a little less. Arguably, we look to spiritual blessings more.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as physical blessings are concerned, it's part of God's covenant to them that none of their animals will be barren. None
Right.
of them will be barren.
Right.
None of them will be sick.
Right.
And,
Their crops will grow, all that stuff.
If you look at the way God had things planned for us, He put us on this earth decisively. We were not living on, clouds, strumming harps.
Mm-hmm.
This is the not perfect world now,
Yeah.
but this is a physical existence that He
Right.
put us into, which we will have later as
Right.
well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we shouldn't shy away from these understandings
Yeah.
of God being physical.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about getting rich. I'm
Well,
saying look
I
at the
totally,
covenant they made with the-
I agree with you 100%, and I think unfortunately that is part of the heritage that we lost when the Gentiles began to dominate the church and strip out all of the blessings from. They turned everything into some spiritual thing that is really intangible, and there are spiritually and intangible blessings that come as a result of this renewed new covenant. And yet, we know now that the covenant of Moses did not go bye-bye. The covenant of Moses has a lot of temporal blessings, meaning if you do these things, this I will do for you. And like he said, health and wellness and strength and riches and defeating your enemies and your cattle giving birth and your crops growing and your enemies staying away from you. Those are real and powerful blessings that we have foregone because we said to ourselves, under the leadership of people who were leading us astray, and I don't know necessarily in most cases willfully, but we let it go. We let go of those blessings. And I think, unfortunately, we could have had so much more if we had just paid attention and we had just read it and said, this is a blessing. This is a blessing. We can do that now. We can do that now. Absolutely. Absolutely, we can get it back. Now, I'm going to just check my time. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. But I want to say the Sabbath rest in Exodus chapter 16, I'm not going to read this to you. I want you to take a look at it. There's some really powerful stuff in chapter 16 regarding the manna and the quail and the Sabbath being instituted. Tracy did a teaching regarding the manna that you should take a look at if you want to dig a little deeper into this. It's on her website. Fantastic stuff. I thought I might have time to read it, but I'm just not going to have time this evening. But I'm going to move forward to just this little section about the attack of Amalek in chapter 17. Starting right from the beginning in chapter 17, I want to read this to you and make a couple of observations on that little T-chart that we had a moment ago. In Exodus 17, verse 1, it starts out saying that the whole community of the people of Israel left the Sin desert, traveling in stages as Yehovah had ordered, and camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. And the people quarreled with Moshe, demanding, "Give us water to drink." But Moshe replied, "Why pick a fight with me? Why are you testing Yehovah?" However, the people were thirsty for water there and grumbled against Moshe. "For what did you bring us up out of Egypt? To kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" And Moshe cried out to Yehovah, "What am I to do with these people? They're ready to stone me." And Yehovah answered Moshe, "Go on ahead of the people and bring with you the leaders of Israel, and take your staff in your hand, the one you used to strike the river, and go. I will stand in front of you there on the rock in Horeb. You are to strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so the people can drink." Moshe did this in the sight of the leaders of Israel. The place was named Massah, testing, and Merivah, quarreling, because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, and because they tested Yehovah by asking, "Is Yehovah with us or not?" Then Amalek came. and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moshe said to Yehoshua, Joshua, Jesus, choose men for us, go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with God's staff in my hand. Yehoshua did as Moshe told him and fought with Amalek. Then Moshe, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And when Moshe raised his hand, Israel prevailed. But when he let it down, Amalek prevailed. However, Moshe's hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other, so that his hands stayed steady until sunset. Thus Yehoshua defeated Amalek, putting their people to the sword. And Yehovah said to Moshe, write this in a book to be remembered and tell it to Yehoshua. I will completely blot out any memory of Amalek from under heaven. And Moshe built an altar and called it Yuvah Nissi, which means banner or miracle, and said, because their hand was against the throne of Yah, Yuvah will fight Amalek generation after generation. Now, this is the complete Jewish Bible, and it's a little bit, it's not a great translation. It just injects some of the Hebrew roots back into your Bible. It's an interesting read, but it's not an awesome translation. But I want to point out a couple of things in regards to it. Here's our chart again, and I want to point out this. In the text, it does not say that Amalek was defeated. It says that Amalek was weakened, which is interesting, okay? And it's going to make more sense in just a moment. It says that he was weakened by the mouth of the sword. Not the edge of the sword, the mouth of the sword. Amalek was not defeated, he was weakened by the mouth of the sword. Then, these enemies, the Amalekites, are defeated by the people of Israel in battle with God's help. Okay? So God did it himself here. The people did it here. They were completely defeated in Egypt. They were only weakened here. Pharaoh is the leader of Egypt, but the Amalekites appear to be leaderless, and they come out of nowhere. I'm not suggesting that they're leaderless, but no leader is mentioned, and they definitely seem to just come out of nowhere. Okay? Moshe does not use his staff twice, he uses it all day long. It's an interesting little tidbit. Hold on to that. It is led by Yehoshua, Yeshua, Jesus, Joshua. It says that he will wipe out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And then yet again at the end it says that there will be war with Amalek from generation to generation. So which is it? Is Amalek completely destroyed? Is there going to be war from generation to generation? Those two things contradict each other. Possibly. Okay. And then Amalek attacked the rear of the caravan, where there were the children, the elderly, the weak, the sick. Now, think about for just a moment what this is a picture of. I think you'll see it when I tell you that you start to compare and contrast these things. You have here God dealing with the adversary. And here you have you dealing with your flesh. This is the spirit, this is the flesh. You have God completely defeating the adversary on your behalf. He expects you to do battle with your flesh. That is what these two things are showing you. The flesh is not destroyed. It is weakened the more you fight against it. You are responsible, not God, but He will help by the power of His Spirit. It's coming out of nowhere. It's coming from within you. Okay? Moshe's staff raised all day. What is this symbolic of? Hands held high with a staff in it. It's either praise or prayer, one or the other. What does it mean that we get tired and our hands go down? It means that we think that our prayers aren't answered. We get tired of praying the same prayers all the time because maybe that we don't feel like they're being answered. Why is there people coming up alongside us to help us lift up our hands? Praying for each other, encouraging one another. Led by Yeshua. Definitely led by Yeshua. Wipe out the memory of Amalek. Your flesh is going to be dealt with one day. It's going to be gone. You're going to have a new body where you're not battling your flesh continuously. But until that time comes, there will be war with your flesh from generation to generation. He attacks you when you're weak. Your flesh attacks you when you're weak and lagging behind and you haven't been strengthening yourself. This is a really interesting picture of battling the flesh and God battling the adversary on your behalf. He's gone. All you have to do is resist him, Peter says. You don't have to do battle with the adversary. He can't come near you. He can't affect you. All you have to do is resist him and he flees from you. It doesn't say you resist him and you can defeat him. It says all you have to do is resist him and he'll flee from you. It's because God's already defeated him. The adversary in your life, he is whispering fear and doubt into your mind. And your weapon against that fear and doubt that's being whispered into your mind is truth. The truth. And remembering what God did. The weapon that the adversary uses in regards to your flesh is just your weakness and you're forgetting what you've been cleansed of. And your weapon to fight against him here is obedience and prayer and supporting one another. So that is a fascinating dichotomy, and I think that as you examine that, you'll see it a little bit more clearly, and there's even many more details that are buried in here, which are quite interesting. That's all I have for you.
That's very good.
Thank you. So next time we'll be looking at Parashat Yitro, which is where the 10 Commandments are given. That's next week. That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a powerful one. Angela, would you like to say one thing before we...
Oh, you mentioned chiasm, so I had to look through there.
I did mention a chiasm. Did you find one?
Well, just roughly, I'm not sure, but you guys might look into, in between the two battles, if you move in, you have 2 complaints about water. The first complaint and the complaint right before Amalek. In the center of that, you have the manna and the Sabbath commandment. So that might be key to this whole obedience thing, and the Sabbath somehow might be the key to the war there between the two things. And earlier you mentioned when you were talking about sometimes you feel like God is just not there. Do not say, is God even with me? Because what happened to the Israelites right after they said that?
I think it was a direct result of them saying that. He's like, oh, you don't think I'm here, huh?
That's when Amalek.
Here's a funny, it's not a funny story, but it's an interesting story that the rabbis said about this portion, where it's like, is God with us or not? It's like a man who is carrying his child on his shoulders, and he's totally taking care of the kid, and everything that the kid wants, he just hands it up to him. They're on a journey through life, and everything the kid asks for, everything he desires, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need this, I need that, he just hands it right up to him. And then all of a sudden, the boy on the dad's shoulders looks around and says to some stranger, have you seen my dad? And the dad takes the kid, drops him on the ground, and a dog comes up and bites him. That's Amalek. That's what the rabbis have said about this portion, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Don't say to yourself, is God with me or not? Yes, he is. Don't doubt it. Don't doubt it at all. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Let's pray.